Great. I didn't know where you wanted to start or how to
Uh,
dive in.
yes, how to dive in. I'm just really interested in your experience of your journey around the gender or whatever it is that's important to you. Um, as I have shared some of mine, and you seem to be somewhat inspired or brought more things that you want to probably share.
Yes, I found myself really, as you were speaking, I found myself like writing, scribbling things down. I think I mentioned
Mm,
in my comment that I wrote several pages as you were
hmm
speaking,
mm.
as things of things that just resonated with me,
Oh, I
and
see.
it did inspire me.
Mm,
I
mm,
was very inspired by the fact that you were able to vocalize, and you were actively vocalizing and expressing so many of the things that I had experienced
mm,
in my own journey
mhm,
through gender
mhm,
and gender awareness.
mhm,
And I think, especially as someone who identified in my female body for
mm,
34 years, and
mm,
I wore that label
mhm,
mostly because I didn't know that there was an option to
mhm,
wear any other labels.
mhm.
I just tried to find comfort within the label that was, put on me, that was
Yeah,
given
yeah.
to me,
Mm,
uh, that was, assigned to me at
mm,
birth.
mhm.
And so I tried to find comfort within that label for, over 3 decades. I
Yeah.
was trying to find my place in this body and in this
Mhm,
in these labels that never felt like they fit.
mhm, mhm,
But I just didn't have the awareness that there was anything else. And then when I did have awareness that there was something else available. There were other, this sort of evolution of consciousness was happening, and
Yeah.
language is evolving also.
Okay.
And as I
How
became
did you
aware,
come to become aware that of your mm, true gender or that you don't have to be the one that is has been assigned to you?
I have this very distinct memory when I was young, probably
Mm,
5 or 6 years old, of
mm,
asking my family, asking my mom
mm,
if she ever wished that she had been a boy, or
mhm,
if at that time I was so young, I did
mm,
not know
mm.
uh how to talk about it. And so I
Yeah.
just remember asking my mom, did you ever wish you were a boy
Mm,
instead of a girl?
mhm,
And
mhm.
she shut me down like
Oh,
really fast. Like it was like
I,
not a discussion. It wasn't something
mm,
that we, and she was like, of course not.
mhm,
No. And that, like, I remember that
mm.
sort of viscerally from a very young age. And so I didn't talk about it for a long time because I was taught so young that it
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
something that I shouldn't talk about.
Mm, mm,
Um, and then I remember I was probably, um, I was aware, I became aware of, um, you know, that gay people existed,
mm,
and that
mm,
people who were that there was this attraction component of who I was
mm,
attracted to. And
mm,
so that sort of shifted. It shifted my attention away from how I felt within my own body
mm,
to sort of start identifying with uh, how I felt attraction to other people. And I feel like that distracted me for a few decades of
mm,
life,
mm.
because it was the closest that I had language
Yeah,
wise.
yeah.
And so I really
Yes.
identified,
I
it was all I was aware of at that
I
point. When my,
understand because the language is already something that's been established in the past. So we
right,
rely on that to figure out our world, but then there's
right.
part of us that doesn't fit into that language world
That is
that's been
so
established. Yeah.
exactly. And that was another part of your story that I really resonated with, because I
Mm,
recognized that I was still limited. When I was labeling myself a lesbian,
mm,
I felt really like this is still not correct.
mhm,
This is still not it. I
mhm,
never felt comfortable with with the
mhm,
label lesbian or gay.
mhm,
Um, like this is partial. Like I felt like it got me partially there in
mm,
terms of feeling like
mhm,
what was true for me. Um, but it still never quite felt like it was
mhm,
true.
mm,
Like I always still felt like I'm just lying a little bit,
mhm,
or
mhm.
but,
Yeah, I can
and
totally relate to that. Yes.
but it was the best I had at the
Hmm.
time. It was like
Right.
the best language that I could find.
Hmm.
And then I think, I was probably it was probably in the late 90s. For me, that was,
mm,
I was in college and I
mm,
watched a documentary about transgender people.
mm, mm,
And it was largely male to female trans
mhm,
people.
mhm,
And like, it was like this recognition went off, and it was like this,
mm,
an awakening of
mhm,
language.
mm,
And I realized, oh, there's something else that I had no awareness of.
mhm,
Um, and it just was never anything that was in my realm of consciousness, that it was possible to speak of myself
mm,
in this other language that
mhm,
described. And it really was the shift in awareness. And that was something
mhm,
else that I wrote down from what you were, um,
mm,
things that you had said in your videos, is that it,
mm,
and once I had this awareness, I was terrified. I
uh-huh,
rejected it.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
I was ashamed. I was
mhm,
afraid, and
mm.
I'm like, I'll just be gay.
Uh,
For a
uh,
long time, I
what
thought, well,
uh, what part of it that really made you become ashamed or distance yourself from that?
I feel like it's probably tied to the same reasons I was ashamed to be gay.
Mm, okay.
Because I had a lot of religious influence,
Mm,
really conservative
mm,
religion,
mm,
because I was raised in a really conservative Christian home
mhm,
in the heart of rural East Texas.
mm,
And so I feel like that really shaped my own internalized homophobia and
mhm,
transphobia. And so
mhm,
I internalized so much of that, and I still carry a lot of that
mhm, mhm.
internalized
Yeah,
judgment.
yeah, yeah.
And so I think that sort of fed and fueled the fear for a long time, because
Mm,
that was my only frame of reference for any
I see.
concept of God, or
Mm,
my own uh, consciousness, or my own sense of self beyond the physical, was
mm,
tied to these religious
mm,
limitations,
mhm.
or and again, it had to do with limiting the language,
Yeah,
really.
yeah, yeah.
And really, it was really misogynistic,
Mhm,
and just limiting in so many ways. And so
mm.
uh, I was afraid to rock the boat. I was afraid of being
Yeah,
different,
yeah, of course.
and just socially too. I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of social. I think the things that we all feel, like not wanting to become an outcast
Right.
socially,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I always wanted to be normal. I
Mhm.
always wanted to be like everyone else.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just
That's
wanted to
how
be.
most of
uh,
us are trained to do about
right,
anything.
about anything, right?
Yes.
And then whenever you recognize within yourself this thing that feels like really different,
Mm-hmm.
that feels so scary.
Yeah.
um, I was my worst judge. I was my worst critic.
Yes, we usually are the worst because all the brainwashing we get, it's just very alive in us, and that's what really criticizes us more than anybody else.
Yes, because those voices live in our own
Yes.
heads,
Yeah.
and they're powerful. And
Mm-hmm.
it kept me in the closet. It helped me
Oh,
hiding
yeah.
and resisting the truth of
Mm-hmm.
I was always really aware of both energies, a masculine and a feminine
Mm-hmm.
energy within
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
But because this masculine piece had no voice, it had no outlet, for many years, and I was trying to and then I found myself just expressing more and more and more masculine over time, and it really wanted to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I finally allowed myself to start expressing myself,
Mm-hmm.
and not resisting this masculine energy,
Yes.
then my feminine energy also felt
Um,
safe, in a way. And I was
really?
able to sort
I
of
see.
embrace my femininity in a way that I had been resisting for many years too, because I was
Mm-hmm.
also really
Mm-hmm.
afraid of my feminine, especially as I became more. And I think I remember I wrote it down. You had said something about like feminine mannerisms in a masculine body. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, and now that I have been, I started my physical transition like 13 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
12 years ago,
Yes.
um, quite a while,
Mm-hmm.
enough that I have I had 34 years as in a feminine female
Mhm.
identified body, and
Yes.
a body that other people recognize as being female and feminine.
Mhm.
And then I've had now over a decade of being sort of in a body that other people
Yeah.
recognize as being
Mhm.
male or
Mhm.
masculine.
Mhm.
Um, in the first few years, I feel like I was just trying to find this equilibrium or find, I was just exploring this other
Yeah, yeah.
realm, this other world.
Yes.
Uh, and so really it's just been the last few years that I've been really allowing myself to embrace
Mhm.
both. And I feel like that's been my own personal journey of like,
Oh, really? Because I'd like to hear more about that because that's not obviously not my choice or experience.
mhm,
But I want to learn.
right.
Yes.
I feel like it is evolving for me. Like
Mm,
my own experience of gender
mm,
has evolved for sure.
mhm. Yes.
I feel like when I first started, I just wanted people to see the masculine side of me.
Mm,
This part
okay.
that I felt like
It
other people
helped
were.
to transition to be seen that way.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. And then once other people could see this part of me,
Mm,
and I felt more visible, more seen. But then I felt like as time went on and I was being more witnessed in this more masculine form, and people could see my masculinity, people could see my maleness. Then I started missing the fact that people were not seeing my femininity and
oh,
my
really
and
interesting.
I could appreciate it, I think, in a way that I couldn't before. And I think it took me
Mm.
sort of having this transition experience for me
Tell
to
me a little
really.
bit more about that part because I do want to know. Like, I still have some level of resistance to accepting my feminine side, and because I just don't. It's been something that I was resisting my kind of for a long time, but I have worked on accepting myself. But then there's this whole always some level of discrepancy within me and from outside about there's some especially from outside there's a reflection of my actually confusion probably. But they don't want to decide or they do want to decide on either male or female usually, and then some people have confusion, and um, I do have a hard time. I guess I do have a hard time people seeing me either as a man or a woman, actually. And there's
Mhm.
always that reflection is always my confusion to some extent still. So for
Still,
you have transitioned and now in the sense of how you look from outside um, is definitely male, and
yes.
that being fully recognized and acknowledged. And that helped you, you're saying, I understand you're saying to accept and acknowledge your feminine side more.
For me, that has been my
Yes.
experience. That
Mm,
was an unexpected
mm,
surprise.
mm,
And um, because I feel like I began my transition to escape my feminine
I
side in a
see. Yeah, yeah,
way.
yeah.
I feel like I was really just wanting to be seen. I was desperately wanting to be seen as male, as
Mhm,
masculine.
mhm,
And I did not want anyone to recognize or acknowledge, because I feel like for 34 years, that's all people saw,
mhm.
despite my
Right.
every attempt at being
Mhm,
expressing in a more masculine way. All
mhm,
anyone ever saw was
mhm.
my femaleness.
Right.
And so when I first started, it was this attempt to just escape that.
Mhm, mhm,
And so I remember when I first started my transition, I told people that if gender is a spectrum and
mhm,
I'm starting like towards the middle, because I was never like a
mhm,
girly girl.
mhm,
I was
mhm,
always a pretty, like I was a tomboy growing up,
mhm,
and I was identified as a butch lesbian.
mhm,
And so I always had sort of these masculine
mhm,
nicknames and leanings, even when I was
mhm,
on the female side of the spectrum.
mhm,
Even when people recognized me as female, I
mhm,
think they also recognized that that I wasn't like all the way at the feminine side of the
mhm.
spectrum.
Yes.
Um, So I always, when I first started, I remember telling friends that if it's the spectrum and there's a line that's kind of halfway, I
Mm,
really just wanted to step over the line
mhm, mhm,
and just step from being like a really masculine
mm,
female identified
mm,
person to being
mm.
sort of a feminine. But in reality, I did not know that meant at the time that people then would start seeing me as a gay guy. Um,
Oh,
People would start witnessing me as a
oh,
feminine
oh,
man.
mhm,
And I'm like, well, that's not quite right either.
mhm,
And so I just kept exploring the masculine
mhm.
side of the
I
spectrum. So
see.
so I
Okay.
continued, like I didn't
Mhm,
stop taking I increased the number of
mm,
the hormones that I was
mhm,
taking. I really leaned into uh, my masculine expression,
mm,
just
mm,
mo and at first it felt like an exploration
mhm,
of identity for me
mhm.
because it was sort of this
Yeah,
new world,
I see.
and I felt like I needed to explore it to fully find myself,
Mm,
really,
mm,
in some ways. So I ended up just allowing myself to express more and more masculine. And as
mm.
that happened, I realized um, that I stopped caring as much about labels. As
I
I found more
see.
and more comfortable
Mm,
inside, it didn't matter as much how other people perceived me, as I found more and more comfort in my own skin. So I stopped caring so much if people got my pronouns right or wrong,
mhm,
because I recognized the truth in all of them, in all of those
mhm. I
pronouns.
see. I see.
And I think I just stopped being as easily triggered by
Mm,
pronouns that I
mhm,
perceived as being the wrong pronouns for
mm,
me.
mm.
Because for a while I was really triggered
Yeah,
by
yeah, yeah.
pronouns that
Yeah.
I perceived as being wrong for me.
Mhm,
And then over
mhm,
time, it was like that was something else I wrote down, that you had said that there's like this relaxation around the boxes or the
mhm.
labels. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
definitely what I have experienced is I have
Mm,
relaxed
mm,
around my own labels and my own boxes as
mm,
time has gone. Like I just
mhm,
don't care as much
mhm,
about how other people perceive me
mm,
as I have found this comfort in myself.
mm,
Um, and it really has been about embracing like both of these energies,
mm,
and really looking at it beyond the physical and
mhm,
seeing it as sort of this multidimensional expression
mhm,
of
mhm,
both energies.
mm.
And then it became about the creative process. And I really
Oh.
shifted, in how I see gender at all. And it became
Mm,
this energetic expression
mhm,
through creativity. And that's kind of how I see
mhm.
gender now. It's like a creative expression.
That is
Uh,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh.
but that doesn't help me necessarily in day-to-day society where they still
Mm.
have these labels and
Right, right.
still
Yeah.
are gendered bathrooms, and
Uh-huh.
uh, the world around me, the three-dimensional world, is still very much this gendered
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
And then I come from within my skin of like finding peace within myself and back
Mm-hmm.
into this world where
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah.
which are you? Are you a guy or a girl?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the society demands to know.
Yeah.
And in some ways, especially still because I'm still here in Texas,
Yes.
um, and where it is very rigid in terms of gender roles and the binary,
Mhm.
and so I feel like mostly the pressure now is coming from outside of me and
Yeah.
not inside of me,
Mm.
which is a relief in some ways.
Okay. So when people label you in whatever way they do, it doesn't seem to affect you as much now.
Um, Yeah, that is correct. I do feel like it doesn't, because before I took it very personally. I thought they were correct, regardless of
So I
how they
see.
labeled me. Uh, if early in my transition people were still seeing me as a she or a
Mm,
her,
mm,
it hurt my feelings. Like, and I would
mhm,
be like, "You see
mhm,
me,"
mhm, mhm,
um, and now once and for several years, once they
mhm,
started seeing my masculine self,
mhm,
then it became really important for me to be out as a trans person so that people
mhm.
could see that I'm
Yeah.
not just a cisgendered
Mhm.
male.
You're right.
Uh, and then it became like I wanted people to know that I'm
Mhm.
not a
Yes.
cisgendered
I
male.
hear that from other trans people that they want to be seen as a trans person, not a cis person, even
Right.
when they look
Yeah.
like a man, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I thought for a long time that that's maybe what I would want is to
Okay.
just quietly fade into,
Mm, mm,
into normal, to be
yeah.
normal, that thing
But
that I wished for.
yeah, but I think you're normal as a trans person, right?
Exactly. That
And
is my
I think
normal.
it's wonderful that now more and more people are, you know, voicing that they are a trans person, not a cis person. Um, they don't have to become, for FTMs, they don't have to become a man, whatever that means, really.
Right, right, right. Whatever that means.
So that's really shaking the box of men. And
Yes. Yes.
I
Because I
think
think it is like this. That's something else I wrote down that you had said, an evolving of a middle gender, that there
mhm,
is something else besides being
mhm,
man and woman, that
mhm,
we can embody both of those and
mhm,
express them.
mhm,
And there's something else besides um, just being man or woman. Yeah, and I feel like that for me feels most accurate now, is like I'm not a woman, but I'm definitely not a man.
mhm,
I am something else
mhm,
that feels more accurate, that feels more
mhm,
true,
mhm,
that is sort of neither and both at the same
mhm.
time.
Right, right. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
Um,
and
yeah,
finding the beauty
mhm.
in that.
Yeah,
And that,
it's becoming more and more that our concept of man and woman is really a mental construct. And
yes.
I didn't say this in the previous videos. I also made a Japanese version of it.
I saw that. I thought that
And
was great.
in that Japanese version, I also spoke about how when I went into men's bathroom for the first time, I experienced the same thing as in the movie Matrix, the first one.
Mhm,
When Neo gets killed by getting shot in the heart.
mhm,
So he dies, and when he comes back, he sees everything as just codes, right? Green codes that's just
mhm.
running instead of reality. Reality is just codes. And exactly that's what I experienced because oh my God, men and women, that separation or the bathroom that's all mental construct. It was that
Yes.
moment for me.
How powerful. And you know, as you're talking, like I'm realizing that like what a powerful, valuable perspective to be able to have the gift of witnessing that and
Mhm,
and seeing the reality of
mhm,
that,
mhm.
which I think is a gift for trans and non
Yes,
gender
yes, for sure.
non-conforming people, to
Yeah.
be able to have
Hmm.
that gift of
Hmm.
recognizing the
Yeah,
reality of that,
yeah.
that most people do not have
It's
the opportunity to
it's
witness it.
it's totally unconscious for most people, for cis people. Um, and yeah, it's really a mental construct. There's definitely male energy, female energy, but it's really fluid and not solid.
Even
And there,
within, oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Even
I
within
was
what?
even within people who identify as male and female, like those
Hmm.
boxes are getting bigger as to
Yes,
what that means. It is
right.
encompassing
Yeah.
more, and
Hmm.
it looks different. I think people are starting to recognize that to be a man looks many ways, and to be
Yes.
a woman looks many ways.
Yes. And I
Uh,
also saw this, I think it was a Facebook post by somebody. He's in Germany somewhere, who is completely cisgender heterosexual man who's dressed definitely like wearing skirt and uh, everything, high heels and everything, looks very actually sexy, but it even accentuates his maleness, sort of. And I thought it was beautiful.
that is I aspire to that level of comfort in my
Mm,
femininity. If I could
mm,
get back to I'm still not comfortable enough to
mhm,
express myself wearing female
mhm,
clothing that is
mhm.
gendered towards the feminine,
Yeah,
but I see it happening like
yeah.
this. completely cisgendered
Mm,
heterosexual men who are
mhm.
embracing, you know, and it's
You
just
look
another one of
really
those
sexy in that,
you
actually.
know, because it does highlight the masculinity underneath.
Yes, yes,
It absolutely does.
yeah.
And I love to see that evolution
Hmm.
happening, and
Yes,
and the
it's
evolution of language. It is so
mhm.
much easier now to describe.
Mm.
uh
Yeah, because language is basically a thing of the past, of our past consciousness that's expressed. So language always is the last one to change,
mhm.
because our consciousness has to evolve to a certain extent for us to naturally change it to uh, more solid, fixed form. That's
that,
language, I feel.
that makes sense. Yes,
Yeah,
it is more the solidified
yeah.
expression.
Mm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm. But as we see more and more people like us, or more variations of that shows the variations of gender expressions, um, it's just gonna change. The language is gonna change. Our consciousness is gonna change too. So yeah, it will reflect on the language eventually.
Yes, and it's interesting to see like the resistance happening, especially here
Um,
in some of the more conservative states
mhm.
where there's this resistance over that evolution of language, that they're trying to
Yeah.
suppress the language. And like
Yes,
um
it's just a natural progression, and it's also natural to have some people to have that kind of reaction, strong reaction. It's part of the evolution when some kind of change is happening. Some people react negatively, very strongly, but it's going to die down because you cannot go back to this evolution.
right, can't turn back the clock to
No,
progress.
you quite can't. And I don't know if you a believer of this, but I feel the earth is definitely shifting, and there has been so many changes, and some people stay in some more old consciousness earth, and while others are just moving on to newer earth.
Mhm.
And I think that split, the first split, that clear split has happened during the COVID time, the pandemic time.
It was very visible then.
It became very visible, and not just around that, but since then, I think there are more shift is happening in different fields, and that I can see how this sort of split in consciousness is yeah, manifesting in different earth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's very interesting to kind of witness that from a
Mm.
global perspective,
Mhm.
and then seeing while that split is happening,
Mm.
there's this very clear merging of these energies that I think is being
Yes.
reflected in
Yeah.
trans people specifically. Is like
Mhm.
this unity, this uniting of masculine and feminine, that is
Mhm.
where we can actually see it happening in people. And I
Yeah.
think that's another, if there is a purpose for trans people,
Oh yeah.
I feel like that's one of the main purposes, to
Yes.
actually
Yes.
like see that unity
Mhm.
of these two
Mm.
energies sort of merging and
Mhm.
being expressed in a single you know physical body.
Mhm.
And I love seeing it from that perspective too, that it is sort of this reflection of a more global unification
Yes.
of
Yeah.
energies,
Mm, mm, mm.
but not the one that everyone is aware of, certainly because of
Right.
that
Yeah.
splitting of you know away from the old, and
Mm.
this being a really new way of looking at
Yes. Looking at and expressing our energy in on a physical form.
absolutely.
Um, Yeah, and still a lot of us are needing to see it in the physical in order to be convinced than just having the ideas and expressing itself and
Mhm.
just talking about it. And it really helps to have those trans people who have actually transitioned on a physical level, um, it's a good manifestation of what's in our mind to a physical.
Absolutely.
And then I'm also seeing some trans people who are not on hormone, no surgeries of any kind, but totally living a trans person as a trans person too
Yes.
nowadays.
Yes.
Yes.
Eh, and that's interesting to see too, is this whole spectrum within this new middle gender, this
Yeah.
new other way of expressing gender, that there's another
Yes.
spectrum within that.
Yes.
And
And I'm
um,
glad that those people are coming out now.
me
I would like to
too.
see more and more varieties because that's just a human possibility.
Absolutely. And that,
Human. Mhm.
yeah, because I think that is something that was missing when I first started my own transition, is I thought it had to look like, it seemed like there was one path of transitioning.
I see.
And so I started along this path, and I was
Mm,
probably, I was several years into it before I had the realization that, you know, that there was all this variety in the way other
mm,
people were sort of
mhm,
navigating that path, and that it
mhm,
it it wasn't just it was not binary either. That
mhm,
it
mhm.
was like this continuation of like fractal upon fractal of non-binary
Mm,
possibilities. And
mm.
it is interesting to see all those different possibilities, so many more of them like being expressed and shared now, which is so
Yeah.
important. um, and that's been challenging for me, because as I transitioned too, there was
Mm,
this temptation to just let people assume that I'm a cisgendered male. And
mm.
I
I
kind of had
see.
to have like this resurgence of courage to stay out, or to stay vocal about my
Mhm.
transition,
Yes,
about my
no, I'm
identity.
trans, not
Yes,
cis.
not cis, especially when it became so much easier for people just to
Yeah,
assume.
yeah, it's easier
That
to pass, yeah.
is so much easier just to pass.
Yeah.
And there's places that I'm happy to just pass, like in the bathroom. I'm happy
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah.
that, but it is so much more comfortable now just using the men's room,
Mm,
because uh, it is, it's never felt as unsafe
mm,
as going into the women's restroom
mhm,
felt for me.
mhm,
That always felt really unsafe,
mhm,
and so in some ways I'm really happy to just be able to
mm.
pass and you know go in peace.
Yeah, 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 that's important. That's where in bathrooms, I think we want peace.
Exactly, until society can catch up a little bit and it's not
Mhm, mm,
as a charged binary.
yeah.
But yeah, it has, I do feel like it's been interesting as to kind of witness society changing as I have changed.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
when I started, I assumed that it was going to just get easier and easier and easier. And I wasn't accounting for the fact that there would be this resistance
Mm.
of people who are like resisting change, which of course people are always resisting, all will
Yes.
always resist change. And
Yeah.
that's
But
just part of the evolutionary process. But
yes. But then when the big waves come, you cannot resist that.
that's so true.
At first, it's a small wave, so you can resist. You have some leeway as to what do I do with this kind of thing. But when the big wave, when it collects into a big wave, mm, it's like,
Yeah, it's
oh,
happening.
okay, I just have to let it go. I have to
That's
go
right.
with it. Otherwise, I'll die.
That's right. It's change is happening. And it's exciting to see.
Mm,
And it's exciting for me to just have, I feel like it's so much easier to talk about now, to just have
mm.
the words to
Yes,
explain how I
exactly.
feel.
Yeah,
For so long, it felt like there was just no way to even explain it. And
exactly. We didn't have words to explain it, and we didn't have sort of internal permission to say
yes,
things the way we were feeling because we had this unconscious suppression, unconscious judgment about how what we were feeling, that we
yes,
couldn't express that.
right. Yeah. And it feels like now when we have the language and other people have enough recognition to be able to know what we're
Mm.
talking about, so we can actually
Right.
be
Yes.
heard when we
There has
speak
to
our
be
truth.
some kind of established common language
Right.
in order to talk about something. Otherwise, it's like we doubt ourselves easily.
Yes. It's, and that's why I think it's been so important for me to witness other people
Mm.
um, on similar paths and having similar conversations, just
Mhm.
to feel acknowledged in my own truth,
Mhm.
and the fact that it's not just me. And that's why
Right.
representation
It's
does absolutely matter. Like, it is important to see, and I love being able to see more trans people in movies
mm.
and in mainstream
Mhm.
media.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
whereas before, if there was representation, it was usually a negative representation of a
Mm.
trans person. It was
Right.
never
Yeah.
positive. They were
Huh?
the ones being murdered, or
Right. Killing
really,
somebody or yes.
or doing, yeah, they were
Yeah.
uh, the victim or the aggressor.
Yes.
Never,
Just one of the people
yeah,
that
exactly.
who's
And so,
around.
right, just a normal, again, I'm
Yeah.
using that person, just uh,
Yeah, they
a
needed to
person.
stand out in the consciousness of many as trans and they are special and different from us kind of category in the
Mhm.
not really said that way, but in the visual or whatever way, subconsciously that message is out there.
Yes. So it had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was, of course, probably like most. And that, I think, caused a lot of that internalized homophobia, was just the way I was, uh, the first
Yeah,
people that I was
of course.
exposed to in the
Mm,
media that were trans.
mm.
It was not a positive. It
I
wasn't like,
see.
I want
Yeah,
to be like
because
them.
yeah, exactly.
It was like, I do not want to be like them.
Mhm.
So it was like,
That's
it took a while before I saw trans people
mm,
represented in a way that I was like, it was uh, a good feeling to see that reflected back,
mhm,
and not like
mhm.
reinforcing that
Yeah.
internalized hatred.
Yeah, now I remember the Boys Don't Cry movie
Yes, that was
in
one
the
of the
night. It
first,
was towards the end of 90s, I think.
and that's right when I was starting to recognize it within myself and finding the
Mm,
language. And then that
mhm.
movie came out, and I was like, uh-oh, like, that's
Yeah,
not good.
that's
Uh,
not good. I'll get killed
yes,
for being me,
for being
right?
me. And
Yes.
so, because of course I recognized myself in that movie, but after it came out, I was like, I'm just going to be gay. That's way better.
Yeah,
And if these are my
safer.
options, so much safer to just, and I mean, it was not that it was super safe to be gay in the
Hmm.
late 90s, but it felt
Yes.
way safer
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that, like, that first exposure in media was really
Mm-hmm.
was really negative.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't reinforcing, it wasn't making me want to own that truth, for sure. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what, another reason it took me so long to embrace it in myself. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I feel like people who are exposed now, like, who people who are trans in their teens
Mm-hmm.
now, it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that they have access to this language, into much more
Yes.
positive reflections in the
Mm-hmm.
media,
Mm-hmm.
and a different level, an
Mm-hmm.
evolved level of acceptance
Yes.
now,
Yeah.
um, because of all of that we did not have
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
late 90s and early
Yeah.
90s.
And
Um,
I'm seeing like, especially like non-binary people, it's like, wow, really? It looks like there's some people who are like totally, I guess they were born female and completely sort of really accentuating their boobs and everything.
as
And
a trans person,
yes, and it's like,
yeah,
wow, okay.
yeah, like, that really is just turning gender,
Yes.
our old concepts of gender, like,
Hmm.
upside down. And
Yeah.
which I still, find myself, like, shocked sometimes
Hmm.
by these expressions, and I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, it's so different, the
Yeah.
comfort
Yeah.
that younger generations have
Yes, because
expressing.
they can express it in whichever directions, and it's just their simple expression, period. Nothing
right.
more
The
to it.
fluidity,
Yes.
right. And it's so fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for a long time, uh, I had like before I started transitioning physically
Mm-hmm.
and medically, I changed my label from lesbian
Mm-hmm.
and queer to
Mm-hmm.
uh, gender queer. I think,
Mm-hmm.
now it became gender fluid, but
Mm-hmm.
before that, I think the language was gender queer. And so I kind of embraced that
Mm-hmm.
language as an attempt to like differentiate myself or separate
Um,
myself from the language I was using.
mm.
And now just, that even that uh, concept of gender queer has like expanded and it's so
Totally
much more.
expanded.
It's
Yes.
it
Yeah.
was like one thing or one idea of what
Mm-hmm.
that might look like, and now that looks like an
Yeah, I
infinite
think the
number of
use of the
things.
word agenda queer, like let's say 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, is coming out of a very strained, restricted place
Yes,
of this either male or female thing
right.
that I'm not either, or I'm more on this side or whatever. But nowadays, at least among some people, in especially in the LGBTQ community, I guess, it's that box is really very loose.
Yes,
That
thankfully.
yeah, you can go anyway. There's gender queer is really, even though they may be in the traditional conventional women's box, but it's just right now I'm here. I'm on the real extreme end of it, but I'm trans.
Yes, and
Yes,
the freedom to feel like that they can
yes,
move,
right,
that it's not fixed at all. And
right.
I always felt this pressure to find a fixed point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but then I feel like as I
Yeah,
have
that fixed
explored,
point is
yeah,
a good expression in the
that
old
it's
days, because I think in the old days, yeah, male, female, that
yeah,
fixed point
yeah,
to another fixed point of, let's
yes,
say, trans,
right, right,
another fixed point of non-binary. So nowadays, that's a good one. So fixed point idea of gender, of
yes,
anything,
of anything, yes,
to fluid idea of gender.
yes,
That's
because
what's going on now, is how I see it.
yes, that it's not moving from one fixed point to another fixed point. It's
Right,
really just like moving in general. It's just
right. Yes,
movement. It's just a
movement.
movement.
Yes.
Um, because that did like spark a memory from when I first
Mm,
started my physical transition, this
mm,
societal expectation that since I was transitioning from female to
mhm,
male,
mhm,
that I was very much moving from a fixed female
mhm,
identity to
mhm.
a fixed male identity. And that's what people
Right.
assume. They're like, why aren't you watching football now? Why aren't you playing
Mm,
sports now? Why aren't you
mhm,
like being a man now?
mhm.
And like there was this expectation that I was going to go from being,
Right.
I'm like, well, if you saw me as female before, then you're
Mhm,
certainly not going to see me. I
mhm,
mean, like I'm going to disappoint what you're expecting to see
mhm,
from me as a male because
mm, mm,
I disappointed a lot of people as a female bodied person as far as
mhm,
their expectations of what that should look like.
mm.
And then I disappointed a lot of people in what they thought
Right.
I was
Right.
supposed what I should be as a male
Yeah. But
identified person because I
yeah.
realized it wasn't fixed at all. My own
Mm,
identity wasn't nearly as fixed as I had
mhm.
assumed that it was when I first started myself.
Right.
So,
So
uh,
yeah, I guess that I feel today's big one for me is from that fixed point transition to movement, period.
yes, that is a big aha as
Yes.
of realization that
Mm,
that has been the shift for me is because I think I
mm,
even had that expectation myself
mhm.
somewhat.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Oh,
and
I think everybody did. It's just part of the collective consciousness that gender is a fixed thing. And then
right,
the trans people have started moving it, but to another fixed point.
right. But
But
now we're
as
seeing it.
many more varieties of us are expressing themselves, and then people started seeing, wow, there are many fixed points now that I could also even move around. Since I moved from here to there, and I see a lot of other fixed points here, I could also move here again, or that way, this way, that way, and that's all
Right.
good.
Right. And that it feels
Yeah, so
like
when there are
freedom.
many fixed points, we can see that it's okay to just move around.
That's right. People will stop seeing it as fixed points and seeing it as this fluid
Mhm, mhm.
sea of possibilities.
Yes, sea of possibilities, but we had to see good number of fixed points first in order to move around more freely.
That's right. And I think
And
that's
it's
what we're
also
witnessing.
okay to stay in one fixed point if one chooses to.
Absolutely. And I feel like
Mm,
that is what transition has gifted me is the
mm,
flexibility, the
mhm,
freedom to
yeah.
explore.
Mhm,
When I first started, I don't think I felt that freedom, but the further
mhm,
I've
mhm,
moved down my path, I feel like I'm
mhm,
feeling more free as I'm seeing all these
mhm,
possibilities, and I'm
mhm,
realizing, it's felt more like fine tuning a dial, like
mhm.
that's,
Yes,
oh,
yes.
too
Yeah, yeah,
far.
yeah.
Oh, here, I'm going to move back.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I've kind of been like fine tuning it for myself to find that most authentic expression of,
Yes, that's the part about, yes, authentic, most true expression of our gender. Or, I mean, I don't know if I should even be limiting this conversation as just gender expression, but just ourselves,
yes,
yeah. And
yes. Yeah, because it is
yeah,
beyond gender too. And I do
yes.
see it reflected in other labels that I've worn for
Mm-hmm,
myself and seeing that
mm-hmm,
um, a lot of those labels are not as binary as I had
mm-hmm.
assumed. Gender has been just the outlet that has been the easiest for me to explore
Yes.
um, and uh, be able to kind of practice that
Mm-hmm,
fluidity
mm-hmm,
of expression.
mm-hmm.
It's been sort of an entry point into that realization
Yes.
that all of those social constructs,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yes, yes.
uh, my uh, occupation and
Mm.
my, other things,
Exactly. A
other
lot of
things.
things are becoming more and more fluid instead of fixed.
Yes, not
Yes.
as binary and not as like
Right.
uh, other things that felt like I was moving from fixed point to fixed point to fixed
Mm-hmm.
point, like
Mm-hmm.
feel like a
I
little, little
I
more.
think we had to do that at first from one fixed point to another,
Yes.
outside the
Yeah.
box kind of fixed point.
Hmm.
But
To still have
once,
some sort of structure or
yes, that structure
maybe.
is really going down, use the word dissolving is more of a better
Yes.
word, I guess.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
it's really not just gender. I see it happening all around.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've been interested. How has your experience, um, changed in terms of your own navigation of gender? How do you feel more fluid in general? I mean,
I don't
I'm guessing.
feel as fluid. I don't know if I'm very fluid. I know that I have a 14-year-old boy inside of me that I have neglected for a long time, but he has come up very strongly in the past few years. So I've been spending more time with him, but I also know I have let himself express himself more. But then I also see a little girl in me, like 7 or 8 year old girl
Mhm.
in me. That's more childish and playful, and it gives me a lot of joy in just being playful with just little simple things that I didn't really allow myself to be. So I really appreciate that little girl
Mm.
that I feel I need to spend more time with. Um, but I've never seen a grown up male or female person in me.
That is fascinating that you
Mm.
identify that gender as your inner child, your gendered selves as your
Yeah, for me, I don't know with other people. For me, somehow, I always feel like I'm not a grown up, not an adult.
very similar.
Um, mm,
Me- I have always felt, you know, that there's an element of growing up that I sort of missed out on in a way
yes,
because I have been so distracted by,
right. Plus, there's, a lot of the social structure is related to becoming a man and a woman and having a family.
right.
I've been totally out of that picture. So it's hard for me to see myself as a grown-up person because I just don't have that kind of model outside
So
of me.
that is a very interesting point because that is something that I have become aware of recently is that
Mm,
I in fact, I wrote about this not long
mm,
ago on
mm,
social media on a different social media.
mm,
I have an Instagram for my
mm,
trans experience,
mm,
and I wrote a post there about the fact that I could never picture myself growing old or growing into middle age. Now that
mm,
I'm a middle-aged person,
mm,
towards approaching, middle
mhm.
age era,
Yes,
but I could never picture that for myself because I had never seen anyone like me grown up, or
right.
I'd never seen the path of what someone like me might look like
Mhm,
aging
mhm.
into an adult or even middle-aged or senior aged adult
Yeah.
because I knew I wasn't going to grow up into an old lady.
Mhm,
Like I
mhm,
knew that I was not going to age uh, along those established gender
mhm.
paths.
Right.
And so you're right, it was never modeled for me. And so
Mhm,
I could not picture myself growing older.
mhm.
And so for a long time, I just assumed that I would die young
Mm,
because
I
uh,
see.
because I couldn't picture
Mhm,
myself
mhm,
um, until I started seeing
mhm,
people who had started transitioning,
mhm,
and then I could see them aging, and then I could
mhm,
see this example of what it might look like. And then I
mhm.
realized, oh, now I'm an example of what that might look like. And that was actually that post that I made was, sort of a timeline of my own of like, you know, if you're a masculine identified 20 something, this is what it might look like to age into a 40 something FTM non-binary
Mm,
person.
mm.
Like this is a new way of aging. This is a new path
Yeah.
uh, of something that I had never seen modeled or expressed
Yes,
over time.
mhm. I have always had issues with that because I really didn't know. I still don't know. But more recently, I have started to think that I don't need a role model because I can only be me and I'm not needing to be somebody else. The way I age will be my best expression, and I'm okay with that. I'll be the first one of me.
That's right. The first ever
Yes,
Banchan.
yes.
I love that.
So yeah, I feel that idea about getting old to be this kind of person or that kind of person is at this point feels more externally focused. I'm learning to be more internally focused about my own expression of my life. So I create that. I am a creator of my life, of course, as everybody else is. So I will see, I will see what I will be.
How
But
exciting to discover it as it
mhm.
happens. I
Yes, yes.
love that. I love that you're just owning it within yourself as
Yeah,
opposed to
and I
having to
could
see it.
be, I could be just a forever non-adult.
I love that too. There's a gift in that
Yes.
as an example of another way of being.
Mm. If becoming adult is like becoming a man or woman, really, that's not what I'm gonna do.
That's right. And it's as much a social construct as be,
Hmm.
as being a man or a woman,
Yeah.
being adult.
When that's being dissolved right now,
Yes.
I really don't need to fit into something that's already established.
Love that. I love that. Yeah. Maybe there's a good reason we're not picturing ourselves
Hmm.
growing into, uh, you know, uh, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I love that. That feels like fluidity as well.
Mm, mm.
Feels like and freedom,
Yes,
in a way to not have to, um, confine ourselves to that established
exactly.
path. Yeah,
Right.
it is dissolving as well as
Hmm.
any of those constructs. Yeah, I love
Yes,
that.
yes.
Love that. Yeah, I do think that that is another one of those, inherent gifts in a way of this experience of identifying
Mm.
as, trans or,
Mhm.
as non-binary,
Yeah,
is that,
yeah.
um,
Basically, just living outside the box. This happens to be around gender, but out just being out living outside the box. And we don't know. We are the creators now, so we'll be creating the future.
do you feel more in touch with yourself as a creator with having the experience of
More
more
so
so?
lately.
I love that. So
Yeah.
you do tie that experience of identifying as a creator with your experience of gender, like they're
Hmm.
tied together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Same.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a that's something else that I have been able to embrace within myself
Yeah. Because I don't want
because
to go ahead. Sorry.
because of this experience. Yeah, that was
Mm,
all.
mm.
Because
Yeah,
you don't.
this can I? Okay.
Yes,
This
yes.
has served me in a way as a stepstone. The gender has served me as a stepstone to become a more expanded creator of my own expression. I'm not just talking about gender, of course, no. But being the gender I am, it has definitely started me from out in the outside the box. At the time, I felt like it was a not my choice at the time, but I am now fully owning it. That I feel, wow, this outside the box experience of my life is really serving me now to be more outside the box in other areas as well.
It gave you permission to feel that way in
Exactly. Yeah.
multiple aspects of your
Yes.
life.
Yes.
I love
Exactly.
that. Yeah. And I love that you said that you didn't feel like a choice in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's definitely for me too. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
not have wished for this experience when I
Mm-hmm.
first started. It
Mm-hmm.
felt like, I definitely felt like a victim early
Mm-hmm.
in my experience.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why is this happening to me?
Yes.
Like,
Right.
why do I have to go through
Mm-hmm.
this?
Mm-hmm.
Like it felt like not anything that was serving me. It felt
Mm-hmm.
like something that was punishing me.
Yes.
Uh, and then as I grew within that experience, I
Mm-hmm.
saw all these gifts were revealed, and I saw how it all of the opportunities that were in this experience of,
Mm-hmm.
perspective
Mm-hmm.
um, and how it was actually freeing me in other areas beyond gender, that before, I would have never had this perspective if I hadn't been
Mm-hmm.
through this experience.
Exactly. Yes.
And it freed me, ultimately.
Yes. So we were given a huge gift to step
Such a
outside
gift.
of not just this gender box, but it's applied to many other areas of our life.
Yes, absolutely. And that is something that I couldn't have anticipated, back
Mm-hmm.
when I was feeling like, why?
Yeah.
Why do I have to be
Okay,
this
so
way?
I have a question about the victimhood mentality. Do you still feel like shame and stuff around this gender, your gender?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I definitely do.
Mm-hmm.
When I am alone with myself,
Mm-hmm.
I feel it less
Mm-hmm.
than when I, uh, am out in the world and challenged with being fully that same full expression of
Mm,
myself,
mm,
that I feel confident in being when it's just me, of
mhm.
being like, this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
me and all of my beautiful fluidity.
Mhm,
Uh, I wish I could feel that confidence when I was just out in the world, but I
mhm,
still feel pressure to force myself into a box, to
mhm,
force myself into a fixed point, to
mhm,
blend in, uh,
mhm,
to appear like everyone else, to not stand out, to not
mhm,
be different,
mhm,
to really conform to the status quo of society around me. Like I feel
mhm.
this societal pressure to pick a box
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stay in
yeah,
it,
yeah. Yes,
uh,
yes.
and don't blur any lines and don't
Mhm,
step out of the box.
mhm,
And so I do feel that shame,
mhm,
and that tendency to sort of go back into the closet and hide
mhm.
aspects of myself when I'm in certain company or in certain
I
place,
see.
like
Yeah, yeah.
physical places.
Mhm,
But then I can find myself going into different places
mhm,
and feeling more comfortable to more fully express
mhm.
the total, like all the my blurriness and all my
Yes.
fluidity,
Mhm,
um, without shame.
mhm.
So I do have moments of
I
like
see.
feeling confident
Mhm,
in
mhm,
myself, but then I
mhm,
also definitely still have those
mhm,
moments of feeling shame and like I have to hide this part of myself
mhm,
because people don't understand, or
mhm,
with trying to conform to this people around me who
mhm.
um, have their very rigid still
Yeah,
definitions and
yeah,
boxes, and
yeah.
still feeling the need to sort of put myself into one of those clear boxes that fits in with all everyone else's clear boxes. um, and I feel like that is still the challenge that I face every day,
Mhm.
is like
Yes, yes.
allowing myself to feel that
Yeah,
freedom, and
yeah.
um, you know, and recognizing that shame would dissolve too. It does dissolve.
Yeah, it does.
um,
Yes.
um, but for me right now, it is also this recurring uh, trigger. Like I still feel it, and I
Mm,
still feel that
mm,
internalized shame, but
mm.
not nearly. I do feel like overall it's better within myself. Like
Yeah.
I recognize it now when it
Mm,
happens.
mm,
And
mm,
I can see it for what it is, and
mm,
I'm like, oh, it's happening again. It's just, and it is sort of this wave that washes over me and it goes away.
mm.
Uh, but I know that it's all of that conditioning, all of those old thoughts and habits and patterns that ruled my life for so long,
Mm.
and my you know that binary goal that I
Mhm.
think I had for so long, is like
Yeah.
I was going from that fixed point to a fixed point,
Yes, yes.
and I still feel sometimes that that's what I should do. But I know that's not me.
Mm.
It's just like this construct that or these expectations from the consciousness around me.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure that that's
Yeah.
where it stems from, but it is still there.
Yeah,
And I do
yeah,
still
yeah.
feel it, but I don't feel like I'm as triggered by it when it
Mm,
washes over me anymore.
mm,
Because
mm.
before, I feel like I spent so many years of my young adult life just uh, buried in shame, like
Yes,
really
I
consumed by
understand.
it.
Mm,
And so much so that I didn't know who I was at all,
mm-hmm,
because I was
mm-hmm.
so consumed by the shame of what
Yeah.
I didn't want to be. And
Mm,
I didn't know how to navigate from within that, like
mhm,
of just being consumed by it,
mhm,
and feeling like I had to be in hiding every minute and that no one could know the truth of me. Like,
mhm,
whereas now, uh, I feel like, especially as I have become more like I pass as this,
mhm.
and now people just assume that
Yeah.
I'm a cisgendered man,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
there are facets of my life where I feel still mostly comfortable letting people assume that
mhm,
about me.
mhm,
And so I
mhm,
still feel that shame of like not wanting to out myself in certain scenarios. Um, but then I feel so much more so now, like I'm excited to share the full truth of who I am
mm,
when I'm meeting new people. I feel like they
mm,
don't truly know me until they
mhm,
know
mhm,
uh, you know, several chapters of my story. Like
mm,
if you just witness this current chapter, it's not
mm,
a complete picture of
right.
me. And
Yeah.
so I look for those opportunities now where before I would hide,
Mm,
and I would not want those opportunities to share
I see. I
my
see.
truth. But
Mm,
now I am excited when I
mm,
feel like that opportunity to share, the expansiveness of who I am,
yeah. Yeah.
instead of like
Right. All
con
constricted
like
and
constricting myself
yeah.
into
Yeah.
like these tiny boxes that didn't
Mm,
fit.
mm,
But I felt like that was where I could be safe. So I
mm-hmm.
still, I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it
I get that. Yes. Yes. I
yeah, it is
understand.
better,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
still have those waves
Yeah.
of, of feeling that constriction.
Yes. I've had a interesting experience myself. I have been this shame around my gender identity has become very clearly in front of me more so in the past year or so, and I've been working on that, and I've also watched other um, people's videos, trans people's videos, and I've noticed not just trans people, I guess gay people as well. And I've noticed that people who are really speaking YouTube videos, yeah, I've noticed that people who are really speaking up about themselves for a while now seems to be more relaxed about their gender or sexual orientation. And I definitely saw a difference. And then I also had this idea. Well, the reason why I watched them is because I wanted to be out in public about my identity around gender. And I really saw that, well, this is it. I really need to be really public about it. It doesn't matter how many people sees it, but the opportunity that I'm allowing myself and other people to see me that way um, has really shifted me.
Mm,
Really, in the
mm,
past just few weeks, right?
wow. Say
Like,
more about that. I'm interested in what.
because when you publicize, have you heard of Brené Brown?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so she talks about shame. I was really into her stuff for a while. She
yes.
talks about shame, and if you put shame in a petri dish with judgment, secrecy, and silence, it'll grow exponentially.
Mm,
Yeah, so what you
I feel
do with
that.
shame, right, is to remove all that.
Mhm.
So publicizing and talking
Yes,
about it with people,
yes.
sharing it with people would
Ah,
shrink the shame down.
maybe that's why I felt such a strong urge to have this conversation with you.
Mm, mm,
As part of that,
yeah.
as just to have the opportunity to speak.
Yes. Since I've decided, I had this idea from like in, I think, mm, July, the middle of July, I have come up with this idea of doing a video, a YouTube video about my gender identity and talk about it. Um, it came up actually as part of a 1 month of some shamanic work that I have been doing. And I did some energy work to bring more energy into this theme. And then I have really physically suffered during this 1 month time, but came up with this whole idea of doing a YouTube video. Came up really at the end of it, as if that's like a gift to me. So I had to do it. Okay, so I decided to do it. I also talked to other people that I am going to do it. But then from the beginning, I thought, okay, I have to edit it, make it look a little nice, you know? And then my physical condition got worse for a while. And then I was looking for also, I at least talked to a lot of people about, I'm looking for somebody who would help me editing this video that I'm going to make. I asked the different people for help, And eventually somebody who is a cinematographer, um, I was able to contact him, and he said he wanted to help, and he is totally behind me on this. This subject is important, he said. And I went to see him, and he helped me hands-on doing that for about an hour. I also recorded part of it so that I will remember. Um, and then I started learning to do so, and it's like, wow, this is very difficult. Such a major learning curve for me. I realized, and then I really felt, okay, this is not the time to edit. I have to just get it out.
It became more about just the act of
Yes.
expressing and
Yes, so I did. But then, this person who helped me with the editing skills, I learned that he has one trans boy. He has three kids. One of them's trans
wow,
boy.
wow.
And it was just meeting that kind of person also helped me too.
Mhm,
It,
mhm.
it was a support that came from in a different way from just technical side. And so with that kind of help, I was just trying to do this editing, but it's like, okay, I got so frustrated that I'm just gonna do the slide.
And that's how the lives came about then.
Yes.
It was born out of frustration of
Yes.
technology. Well, that worked out very well, I think.
And then I realized afterwards that, okay, for some reason, I thought I made a decision, or sort of restriction on how to put out this or expose myself, that I had to edit, which took more time and effort and everything. And I realized it was just my resistance to be out completely.
So you were using the fact that you should edit it as
Yes.
sort of the
Yeah.
yeah,
Slowing it down.
I can see how I have done similar things and used
Mm-hmm.
technology as a barrier
Yes. Yes.
to telling my story because
Mm-hmm.
I have felt the same urge, to express my
Mm-hmm.
truth and to talk
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yes.
And so, but I do keep running into the shame,
Mm-hmm.
especially online, because
Mm-hmm.
it feels really charged
Mm-hmm.
sometimes politically, and
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't always felt like a safe space in
Mm-hmm.
general. And so I have really used technological barriers to
Mm-hmm.
stop myself.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, yeah, especially as I have seen also growing up female bodied, and I found myself identifying as lesbian like really early on.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to embrace like that language as being true for me. And
Mm-hmm.
then I added like trans and non-conforming, gender non-conforming language to that I owned. And
Mm-hmm.
then as like my fluidity has
Mm-hmm.
continued to like expand,
Mm-hmm.
and my sexual orientation
Mm-hmm.
continued to expand,
Mm-hmm.
which was a complete surprise to me, I think,
Mm-hmm.
as I continued transitioning. As I became more identified in a masculine body, I found that
Mm-hmm.
I was finding myself more attracted to masculine bodied
Mm-hmm.
people, which was
Mm-hmm.
totally new for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then a whole new chapter of shame came up
Mm-hmm.
around like
Oh, I
uh,
see.
around
Oh,
being like
okay.
someone identified as bisexual or
Uh-huh.
pansexual or
Uh-huh.
even like a gay male, which
Uh-huh.
was the
Yes,
first
yes.
time that I had other people seeing me as
Oh,
not a lesbian but as a gay
uh-huh.
guy.
I
And
see, I
then
see.
so it introduced this whole other chapter of shame that I was like, I wasn't expecting to like feel shame around my sexual identity again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that has been like another chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and that stopped me also from expressing my truth
Oh, I
because
see.
I'm like, how? Because I had this whole community of lesbian women that I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in, and like, how do I even start expressing like this new realization about my own fluidity?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I didn't even, and part of it is me learning how to speak about it in
Mm-hmm.
general. And I think that happened when I first started my transition too, is I just wanted to awkwardly talk about it all the
Mm,
time to just
mm,
random people.
mm,
Um, but then I also found that uh, talking in general became harder as I became more testosterone based.
mhm,
Uh, it became harder for me to like express vocally,
mm,
which I could see in a lot of the men in my life. They never really talked about things, and I could see that I could see, oh, there's some hormone impact to that.
mm,
And so
mm.
like anyway, it was interesting to see like the shame mixing in with something that I perceived as being a hormonal shift in
Oh, I see, I see.
communication.
Yes, yes.
Um, and that it just made it more difficult for me to communicate, to express myself using
Mm,
language.
mm,
uh, and this fact that I was having this whole new chapter of shame around sexual identity,
mm.
a new sexual
Yeah,
identity
yeah,
that I had
yeah.
never
Mm-hmm,
experienced before. And
mm,
I was like, how do I
mm,
talk about it? And then
mm,
hormonally, uh, I wasn't really used to um, communicating from this new
mm.
testosterone based.
I
I
see.
found
That's very
uh,
interesting.
that has been
Um,
another interesting thing.
mm,
That was just
yeah.
something else that came up as you were talking, but
Because it's in terms of sexual orientation, I also felt after I've been exposed to more FTM people in the 90s, and they were talking about their also sexuality, and there were good number of gay men or
among the M.
bisexual people among the
Mhm,
FTMs, yeah, at
mhm,
that time. And then that's when I learned that, oh, okay, even though in the past, in my history, I was always attracted to girls, but that there's this whole possibility. I didn't know that. And then I've never actually had a physical sexual interaction or relationship with men, but the idea somehow meeting those people opened up my ideas and my possibilities that I started getting attracted to gay men
mhm.
more as a gay man myself.
Yes, yes,
And so so I feel that our let's say brainwashing on just a man or a woman and
mhm,
heterosexual is really constraining us in our
yes,
expression of ourselves, because just being exposed to the ideas, not just the ideas but actually seeing those people, has freed me from that very cisgender hetero norm of sexuality.
yes, absolutely.
Mm,
It was definitely this another opening of awareness that I just
mm,
did not even understand was possible
mhm,
because I felt really rigid and very fixed in my sexual
mhm,
orientation
mhm.
also.
Yeah.
As a female bodied person, I had never experienced attraction to a
Mhm,
male bodied person
mhm,
until I became identify more
mhm,
identified as a male bodied person. And
mhm,
then um, there was still a sameness attraction.
mhm,
Uh, but then I realized, oh, but I'm still attracted
mhm,
to women.
mhm,
Um, but there was this added layer of attraction that had never been there before, that I
mhm,
had just never been, or maybe I was just resisting it because of my own. Who knows? Maybe I
mhm,
resisted it but I had certainly had no conscious awareness of any sort of attraction to
mhm,
anyone besides women uh,
mhm,
for decades of my
mhm,
life. And so
mhm.
it was a big surprise that that was also going to become fluid.
Yeah,
As I became more fluid,
exactly.
that
Yeah.
also became my attraction to people
Mhm,
became more fluid. And
mhm,
it was less about, it even became less about, um, you know, physical identity at all. I mean, it really
mhm,
was about the essence of the person. I
mhm,
became much more open to that
mhm,
possibility.
mhm,
As I embraced my fluidity around my gender, I saw
mhm.
that I relaxed. That
Yes,
I think
yes.
I like that relaxing of
Yeah.
um, that old, rigid, fixed
Mhm, mhm,
expectation
mhm.
became more
Yeah, that's
relaxed. And
very strongly ingrained in us.
mhm,
And we face that every day. you know.
Yeah, it is very ingrained.
Mhm.
I don't think I had any idea of how much so
Mm.
until I just started loosening everything, and then I
Yeah, yeah.
saw the loosening in more and
Hmm.
more things. So uh, very very interesting to kind of see it all dissolving as you know as my own awareness shifted,
Hmm.
and yeah, and that feels more comfortable too, to not feel like I have to so rigidly say that
Right.
this is the box that I'm in around my attraction to others.
Mm.
um that feels better now, but I do find that that shame that we were talking about comes up more, and so, because that's the newest you know uh, area that I have become aware of my fluidity in. It's the one that I experience, I think, now the most shame around, because it's the most newly recognized
Mm.
fluid aspect
I
of
see.
myself. So
Just yeah, not so familiar to yourself even a bit.
right,
Yeah.
right. It's still new, feeling that fluidity in that area. So yeah, it's really interesting to kind of witness it and then not judge it and just know that this is how I am evolving, and how I'm embracing that fluidity in other areas of life, and definitely seeing it beyond gender and sexuality too. But
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
because those are such big areas in our existence, that I think
Yes.
we form a lot of our identity around
Yeah,
those two things,
yeah.
those two aspects of ourselves. But yes, I do. It's been interesting to see also, as I have been teaching a class at my local community college the
Mm,
last few semesters,
mm,
and seeing like every semester, it seems like the fluidity is increasing from
mhm,
semester to semester. Like it just
mm,
seems like more, uh, especially in that age group of young
mm.
adults.
Oh, I
Like
see.
interesting to
It's,
see more.
what do you teach?
I teach. It's called Introduction to Computer Graphics,
Okay.
uh, but it's actually an Adobe Illustrator
Um,
class. So I
um,
teach software for you know creating digital illustrations, basically.
I see.
And but every year, and my class is fairly small because it's
Mm,
a community college, but
mhm,
every semester, uh, it's interesting to see. It seems like they get a little more non-binary, they get a little
mm,
more queer, they're becoming more and more
mm,
fluid each semester.
mm.
And so it's interesting to witness it in a container like that.
Oh, I see.
A container of
Interesting.
a younger
Yeah,
generation,
yeah, yeah.
and kind of seeing how
Mm.
how
Especially in the art field, it's
yes,
easy to
yes,
see. Yeah.
I do feel like
Mm,
that was a big reason I feel like I followed that career path, because
mm,
it felt
mm,
like a safe place where
mm.
I could be, where I could step out of the box,
Mhm.
where they, in some areas they want you to step out of I mean,
Yeah,
as an
yeah.
artist,
Yes, right.
you have permission to,
Mhm.
to be weird and to be
Mm.
different and to be
Right. Yeah, that's more
other than,
encouraged.
it's more so encouraged. So
Yeah.
as opposed to like becoming an accountant or a
Mm.
doctor,
Of
which never
course,
felt like
right.
a, and it also felt like too grown up of a job for me.
Mm, mm,
For my, at
mm,
least as an artist, I could,
mm.
embrace my inner child and not grow
Yeah,
up
yeah.
really,
Mm,
that tendency. But yes, so it is interesting, and I know that it is this bubble,
mm,
this art bubble
mm,
that especially here in East Texas, which
mm.
is very conservative, and there
Mm.
are not a lot of safe places, but I see it in that
I
container of
see.
of
Okay.
of
That's
artists.
good that you're choosing that safe space.
Yes, and I it feels like I want to foster that safe place
Mm. Oh,
for my
yeah.
inner child,
Yes.
and in these
And
people
for
who
other people, yeah.
for other people,
Yeah,
right? To
yeah.
kind of help create a, a safer and even safer
Mm,
container for
mm,
them to express
mm,
who they are.
mm.
Um,
And they will
where
expand that space more.
let's hope. I know that is
Yes,
exciting. So
yes.
that's fun to see,
Mm,
especially when I know there's not, even for myself, there's you really do have to seek out those safe spaces and create
mm,
them. And
mm,
so that's what I'm really looking
Mhm.
excited about the opportunity to help
Mhm.
create more of those safe spaces
Mhm.
in my little world, my little physical space. How are you finding the experience of expressing your masculinity in your physical world? Uh, do you
I don't
do
know
you find
if
yourself
I'm
looking for safe spaces, or do you feel
I my lifestyle right now, I don't have a lot of interaction with people. Um, so I'm just being me often, and it's a completely another subject, but I have been going through a major change in my life right now. Um, I have stopped being a healer just about a month ago or less than a month ago. Um, and being a healer is a kind of like somewhat respected, um, I guess, profession, sort of. And people don't really care what usually what you look like, what you do, what kind of expression you are, as long as you do the job of healing.
mhm, mhm.
So even like more than 20 years ago when I was an acupuncturist, it was a perfect job for me to be in the hiding in a way, because
You
I
could,
was totally being myself in my mannerisms or just in my clothing or whatever. But that didn't matter to my patient.
right, right. Your job took
Yes,
precedence over any other
yes,
label that you
right,
were wearing.
right. So it was in that sense a very safe job for me.
Right, right.
And some patients thought that I was a man. Some people was writing checks with Mr.
Right. And it didn't even matter. It was
It didn't
irrelevant.
matter to them.
Right, right. That is interesting. And so
Yes.
as you let go of that label, the healer label, I
Yeah.
can imagine it exposes um,
Yes.
uh, the other labels that
Yeah.
have
Other
been so.
labels or whatever, I may be seen. I feel more naked because of
Mm,
that.
mm,
And but I'm more committed to living my own essence. It doesn't matter what other people really think of me. I mean, it still affects me. Yes, it would be lying if I said it doesn't affect me at all. Totally not. But I think I'm on a journey to break down um, some of those fixed ideas about not just gender, about like jobs, work itself.
mm,
Like you have to work hard to earn your living. That's
mm,
another old concept I feel. Like
mhm.
if I really express my own essence in every way, I think the abundance will come, the universe would support me. I mean, still a little bit idealistic. It sounds a little bit idealistic, even to me, just a little bit. But now I feel I'm more mm, in tune with it
You
better.
feel the truth of it
Yes,
for
I do
you.
feel it more.
Yeah. And I do
Because
think it's something else we're seeing reflected a lot more now too, is you can see the truth of that
Mhm.
uh dissolving and people who are just living and th- the truth, their truth,
Mhm.
and finding uh and being supported in that. I
Yeah,
see that, I see it happening. uh
yes.
and I see those old ideas around our
Mhm.
jobs and how we create income and
Mhm.
those things dissolve. And I definitely feel like that's tied to this experience,
Yes,
to the things that we're talking about.
yes.
It's more of those constructs that are
Yeah,
dissolving. Wow. Well, I've really appreciated your time, and
yeah.
I'd love
Me
having
too.
this conversation with you, and
Yeah.
just having the opportunity to reflect with you, and
Me too.
and express. So
Yes,
thank you.
expressing is important and to learn about your experience, your journey. That's been really good for me too.
Well, I'm glad that there's been some value for you in it. It's definitely, it's felt very healing for me just to be able to express some things that, uh, and especially since I feel like in the beginning of my transition, I talked about it a whole lot more often. uh, you know, I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I was, obviously talking about it a lot in the first few years of my
Yeah,
transition, and then over
yeah.
time, you just I stopped talking about it,
Mm,
and um, and I have, especially in the last year, I've been feeling like this growing
mhm.
pressure to want to express
Um,
and talk about
yeah.
it, and I could feel it, and I could feel that excitement as I was watching you talk about it, and I was writing notes, and I'm like, well, this obviously needs to happen. I need to reach out to you, and
Yeah,
I'm so glad you were open to just
of
chatting
course.
with me, and
Yes, of course. It's been
yeah,
great.
it has been for me too. Just to
Thank
sort of
you.
reflect and especially on my experience now, sort of removed from what feels like the heart of it. But I
Mm,
realize I'm still in the midst in the midst of finding my fluidity and finding
mhm.
my
It's the journey always continues.
always,
Yeah,
always.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love watching your beautiful journey unfold, and thank you for your generous
Thank you.
sharing.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you for your sharing too.
Yeah. Well,
It
I've
expands
really
my world.
same here, and maybe we can do it again
Yeah, yeah,
sometime.
yeah.
I would enjoy
Okay.
that. I think these conversations are important, and
Yes, it is.
they
And
can look
I'll send you the recording. Yeah. Yes.
absolutely well. So
Yes,
great connecting with you,
yes,
and
great connecting with you. Have a
absolutely,
great
we
rest
won't
of
wait
the
another 10 years to do it again, maybe.
right, right, exactly.
Well, take care. We'll
Okay.
talk again
You
soon.
too.
All right, bye
Okay, take
bye.
care. Bye-bye.